Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I've got my father, Alan Huntsberger, in the studio with me, and we're going to start off with our foundational verse. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord, for he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. Alan, we start with this verse every single day because we want to establish, hey, we got the World Economic Forum, the WHO, we've got China, we got everyone trying to take a grab for the world. We believe you should get your hands off. This is God's world. He created it. He's in control. But that's what's happening, right, Dad? We got so many people weighing in and trying to take everything.
Well, yeah, which is nothing new. I mean,
Nothing new.
That's happened, since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
But, I think the beautiful thing is that we all need to realize that God is in control. And if you really want freedom and truth, you need to draw near to God.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the important part.
Well, I'm excited about our next guest. I think you're going to like this one too, Alan. His name is Brian Reisinger, and he's the author of Land Rich, Cash Poor, My Family's Hope, and the Untold History of the Disappearing American Farmer. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Brian, I love talking to farmers, and of course, you being a farmer, that's good. I was a farmer for 21 years of my life, and from the time I was born till then, and the farm in our family has been over 100 years, and we were raised and born and bred on the whole farming scenario. But I disagree with where you think it's heading, the disappearance of the American farmer. I think we're going to have a rebirth of the American farmer. Because right now, when we see that Robert Kennedy, for example, is going to be on one of the, cabinet secretaries for President Trump, and he's all out for getting the pesticides and all that kind of stuff out of the food, and getting back to the natural, organic type of food. I think what that's going to do is birth a resurgence of the small farmer, where you can have a smaller farm, but you're serving quality vegetables and meat and eggs and all of that kind of thing. And maybe even a direct line to the consumer than most farmers have today.
I think that's the hope. We talk in the book about how we've been losing farms at the rate of 45,000 a year on average for the past century. The hope is we're at a turning point where we could turn that around. So I would actually love to emerge from the next couple of years with you and I in agreement that we've got that rebirth. The question is whether we're going to accomplish that rebirth or not. And there are all the forces that have led to the disappearance of farms for the past century that are still bearing down on us. So we got to identify those forces. We got to take them on, and we got to figure out how can we do exactly what you're talking about in terms of finding a new rebirth for the American farmer. The good news after losing all those farms is we've still got nearly 2 million left. 88% of them are small farms. People are always surprised to hear that. The reason that they're there is they're working 2 to 3 jobs. They're working factory shifts, pouring concrete, working a construction site, and farming, whatever the case may be. If we can find a way for them to be growing entrepreneurial ventures again, we can have a rebirth of the American farmer with those farms that remain. But we've got to act, because if we don't, we're going to lose the remainder of our family farms in about a generation, in about 40 years, if the pace of disappearance continues.
But I agree with you, but farmers have to be a little creative. You got to think, okay, I've got X amount of acres. What is the average small farm? Is there an acreage?
That's a great question. The midpoint for acreage is now up in the thousands, but
Right.
You're exactly right. Small farms, our farm's an example of this. We're 4th generation. My dad's 3rd generation. My sister's actually working to take it over from him. And as we go through that process, our farm, like so many, faces the challenges, but also the opportunities. The challenge is that a lot of the markets that are available to you are kind of those existing markets. They got some level of income you can count on, but it's traditional crops that really, frankly, the markets have been working for farmers for a very long time, to your point, and the government has gotten involved and with subsidies and other things has made it where people are kind of captive to that market that isn't really quite making them a living, you know.
Right.
Or you can try to transition toward new markets. And we're always talking about that in our family meetings. Okay, you know, can we put a little bit of acreage toward this? Can we put a little bit of acreage toward that? Figure out a way to transition towards some things that have some entrepreneurial opportunity to them in the future.
Right. I guess the way
Alan,
I
you
look-
got to be careful. You sound like you're making it sound so easy, but you're sitting in the cheap seats, man. You need to get your hands dirty, get on a tractor and try and make it happen. I think there are a lot of farmers that are trying to be creative and trying to come up different ways. And I think they're being stonewalled every chance that the government can stonewall them. Is that not right, Brian?
Yeah, it is. And this is, you guys know, because you've been, studying this and been living close to it in certain times of your lives as well. This has been going on for decades. When we look at the American government, whether it's the Democratic Party or whether it's the establishment of the Republican Party traditionally, both parties have made decisions for a very long time that have ended up not accounting for the way that our economic crises affect our farmers. And they don't know what's going on the ground with farms, let alone how it affects our food,
Yeah, I'm not trying to discourage you, Dad. I think your enthusiasm is needed. I think the team definitely needs a cheerleader out there. But I'm going to go ahead, speak. Sorry.
Well, I mean, it matters to creativity. I mean, when Corey and his sister were kids, they went to a Christian school. So how do we afford the Christian school? Well, we raised 500 chickens. We got the little chicks in the spring. We grew them until they averaged about 10 pounds of chicken. Then we butchered them and sold them as farm-fed chickens. And we would have people coming out to our acreage, buying the chickens, thinking that greatest thing's sliced bread. I remember my wife. She grew up in a city. And when we grew our first batch of chickens, and we had one of them and cooked them for supper. My wife's first comment was, "This tastes different." And I'm going, "Yeah, this tastes the way chicken's supposed to taste, right?"
Yep.
It's totally different than the chicken that you find in the store, which never gets outside, never scratches on the earth, never sees the sun or the moon or anything else, is kept in a building and is regulated for, I think it's 49 days or whatever it is, and then they're butchered. And so they grow, but it's not the way God intended chickens to grow.
I was gonna say, you're talking about something that's, I think, making a comeback after a lot of parts of the country it was wiped out. What I mean by that is, it used to be that when you were a small farmer, if you had a tough year, you'd sell a trailer of hogs or a trailer of cattle. You had different ways to hedge around things. You maybe raised chickens. You did all kinds of different things. After the farm crisis in the 1980s and a lot of other different economic crises that have hit, it really forced specialization on a lot of farms. They grow one or two things. They got one or two main products, and they live and die by that market. And in most cases, the market is broken and the government has twisted things on top of it. But now it's coming back because people care more than ever about where their food comes from. And we have to keep that going. If that demand can grow, then you can have family farms that have maybe been locked into some traditional crops and products, able to shift toward more of the types of things you're talking about. It is making a comeback, and I hope it's something that can continue and surge so that farmers can, with a little bit of creativity, adjust toward shifting towards some new markets.
Well, you see, this is why we had Bobby Kennedy. We had him on as a guest of our Talk Truth show, because what he's talking about is absolutely right. There's children, that are suffering diseases here that, when he was a child, didn't even exist. And it's because of the chemicals and everything else that's in the food that we buy in grocery stores and all that kind of thing. And I think that we're headed down that way. We just need some farmers that can be a little creative. Corey and I were even thinking of developing organic farms in such a way that it'd be like a golf course. You'd be a member of the farm and you'd get a special price, but it was product that would be growing, that would be growing without the chemicals and the organic. without the chemicals that are put in meats and all that kind of thing. I will not buy vegetables in the store. Dr. Judy Makovitz comes on our show and actually says she won't buy, if the store has a pharmacy in it, she won't buy it. She'll only buy the food and the produce from the farmer's market, where she knows that there haven't been pesticides and fertilizers that have been used to grow the product.
Brian, I want to hear from you. What is the problem? I mean, your book teases us with the untold history. What is the problem? Why are they disappearing? Why are young people like yourself? Yeah, and I don't know. I know you're helping the farm out, but why is it not attractive to the younger generation? So they leave the farms and they bail. What's the issue?
I'm glad you asked about that. It's deep-seated issues over the course of the past century. So what we did with the book is we dove into what are the hidden areas of history driving the disappearance of our farms, and we wove that with our family's 4-generation story from the Depression to today. And what we found is that the reason that this is happening is because of massive economic forces that are wiping out our farms. So one is our country has frequently not understood the way that an economic crisis affects farms on the ground. So we bungle the response. The farmers are getting wiped out and people don't realize what's going on. The second thing is governmental decisions by policymakers for decades that have made the problem worse. And the third is that technology has left so many family farmers behind. It's advanced a lot of farming, but it's also needlessly been tilted against medium and small size farms that could be perfectly competitive if the technology was available to them. So those three issues have piled up. And when you get to young people, I'll tell you, our family is a perfect example of this. My sisters work and take over the farm. I'm grateful to help out on the business side in my spare time. And they throw me in a tractor my days off, but my calling was writing. So I'm just honored to tell our story. And the reality is I look at my nephews, and I've got a little 10-month-old girl. We'll see what she wants to do with her life. But my nephews, a lot of them, they're really good at farm work. They're involved, they're engaged, but nobody's telling kids like that, hey, go be a farmer. You don't have a guidance counselor telling kids like that, go farm with grandpa or go farm with mom. Most of those kids end up going into the trades, maybe working in other parts of agriculture, going off to the military, going to college. Those are all noble things to do. But the reason is because there isn't that new economic horizon. Now we're talking about it here, and we're hoping that it can begin to take root. But for decades now, kids have been seeing that light go out. And they don't have people encouraging them to do it. But you got a lot of kids in FFA and 4-H who love animals, love working close to the land. If only they thought they could make a career out of it. They're worried about their futures.
Right. I think that, everybody does. But, I think that we're beginning to turn the corner. I know, for example, my wife and I, we're looking for a farmer that will raise vegetables and raise, beans, lettuce, peas, beets, potatoes, whatever, on ground that's not going to be fertilized and not going to have pesticide. And we're prepared to buy a big freezer, and we'll buy from him and him alone, and we'd be one of the customers. And the way I look at it, if you want to be creative, as a farmer, you need what? 50 of those people? You need 50 of those people that'll say, I'll buy your product. So you know that if you take care of growing solid, God-made vegetables and God-made meat and whatever, that you're going to have 50 customers that will pay you cash money for you to raise their food. So it's like they can't because they live in the city, but you've got the farm. Yeah. So let's start taking advantage of that opportunity and start creating this. I think too many times we have a victim mentality. And the victim mentality is, well, this is the way the government's going to go and whatever. But who is the government? Is it not we the people? Is it not we the people who are the ones that make the decision of what kind of life and what we should be eating and what our lifestyle should be about? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, and if more of that demand from the consumer can rise up, I think that's what's going to power the change. People wanting to know where their food comes from. That's what's going to power the change. And what I always talk about is with most family farms, unless they're the really big farms, most of the small family farms, they're small businesses. And so what they need to be able to do is have that creativity that you're talking about. And we have to remember also that they're small businesses that are operating on very tight margins. They've only got a little bit of money. So they need to take that little bit of money, risk it on a new crop or product. They should be doing that. They should be innovating, but there's small amounts of money to be used for that. And there's risk to that. So we've got to understand that small businesses making a transition to be able to come out on the other side of that. And I think they can. I think we can do that. But we need that demand that you're talking about to continue to rise. And we need, the farmers who are operating these small businesses to be able to make that transition.
Yeah,
Brian,
I'm sorry.
can I just want to, Brian, you see father, son working together. I'm sure you and your dad yelling at each other on the tractors. Oh yeah. Who can lead that? Who can lead making farming great again? Like, who in your mind, because I know it's tough. Like you said, all the farmers gathering they could have such a powerful voice in the country if they could get together, get organized, and start working together. Who do you see can lead that and make farming great again for the farmers?
Well, that's a great question. I guess I got to be honest with you. I don't think that there are very many people who've studied the agriculture issue from the perspective of what we're talking about. It's been studied for so many years from the standpoint of kind of how do you preserve what you've got, and it's really challenging. I don't know if there is any one person out there. I hope that someone emerges, but really it's, all of the farms being willing to move forward together in the way you're talking about. And it's all of the consumers saying, I always encourage people to think about this one question, and it fits very much with what Alan's talking about, which is, what are you doing to create new entrepreneur opportunity for our farmers? The farmers need to do that, but as we think about consumers, what are you doing to create new entrepreneur opportunity for our farmers? So that's going to the local farmers market, stopping at the local butcher shop, asking your grocer to carry local goods, joining a CSA where you're dealing directly with the farmer, whatever the case may be. What steps can you take? Because the more market signals the farmer sees that they can turn and sell their crops and products directly to the consumer or into a specialty food market, as opposed to just the national supply chain that we have, the more possible it's going to be to make those changes. So I think it's all of us.
I think that the beautiful thing that I always look at the positive side. Let's say all you need is 50 customers. You need 50 customers to sell them the vegetables and the meat and everything else that you grow on your farm to make you a comfortable living, right? But you know what? Those customers will be repeat customers because they all got to eat. They got to eat every year. And every year you could supply the good for those 50 customers. So, I think we need to bring it down into a small area instead of looking at the big area.
The problem is, Alan, people want variety. And Brian, am I right in saying that farmers have really become more specialized than variety, right?
Yeah, you guys are touching on all the crucial issues. Here's what happens. I think that there are individual farms that can find the type of solution that Alan is talking about, as long as they have the people in their area willing to do it. There are a lot of farmers. Our farm is among them. There are many farms trying to find ways. Okay, how do we tap those customers? How do we gather it up? How do we make sure it's going to scale enough to be able to support the farm? Stuff like that. There's people working through all that. And I think we also have to understand the broader forces that have pushed us toward farms specializing as well. Because I'll give you an example. So you can try to find individual customers, and that is something that farms of our size are working to try to do. But in the meantime, the way the market infrastructure is set up is that most small farmers, they don't have anywhere to take, artisan tomatoes or specialty garlic, but they've got, if they're going to grow field corn, they've got a local grain elevator. Now that field corn, that market isn't doing enough to make a sustainable long-term industry, but there's a solid base there, and they don't have anywhere to take a lot of these other crops and products. But if more of that consumer demand grows, and if more of those consumers are trying to find those creative solutions, those couple crops where they can find someone locally to buy it, we just got to close that gap between the farmer and the consumer, and the work is being done to do it. And I think Alan is talking about the farm side of it. That's absolutely right. And there's also just those larger structural challenges that stand in the way. A lot of farmers look around and say, I'd love to grow something new. I don't know who I'm going to sell it to. I don't know where I'm going to go with it, because all the market infrastructure, our whole economy is basically organized around the idea that farms should be producing one thing as fast and as much as they possibly can on as high a level as they possibly can, whatever it takes chemical wise, whatever it takes process wise, because we want to ship that all over the country. And we've got consumers who say, I want every kind of food every moment possible, no matter the season. And so you get all this food that's in the grocery store that isn't natural, it's preservatives and all that sort of stuff. So if we can make those changes on the farm level and make those changes on the consumer level, be excited to do what you're talking about, go buy from a local farmer. And, no, maybe you can't get grapes every time of year, but you get grapes when they're in season and they're amazing. And then you switch over to peaches or citrus, like be able I mean, that was the way that it was naturally done. That's the way God intended it, right? Is we all
Yes.
eat food that the earth gives us in different places at different times. And so
Yes.
consumers being willing to do that can unlock a lot.
So importing food has also been a problem then, right? From other countries. That's a big problem.
Right. That's right. So we've got in America, we've got an agricultural trade deficit of $42.5 billion, meaning there's $42.5 billion more dollars in food being imported into the country than exported. So think about that for a second. We're wiping out our farms at the rate of 45,000 a year. And at the same time, we're depending more and more and more on other countries for our food. And this is something that's happening all across the globe. And the reality is that if you don't have the ability to provide a domestic food supply to your country, what do you have? So we should be supplying our food and then selling the excess abroad. But instead, we're wiping out our domestic food supply and depending more and more on other countries. That's a voluntary hostage situation. Can you imagine doing that in any other situation?
No. But it's like President Trump says, drill, baby, drill. You gotta think about providing, and being self-sufficient, in what God has given us. Okay, so I happen to think that how does God help us to make money? And I think one of the aspects of it is creativity. Just asking some ideas, creative ideas. How can we make 10 acres or 20 acres or 100 acres? How can we make this sustainable for us as a family? And, not everybody's going to want to do 100 acres, but I can tell you what, there's a market out there already that if just by, people talking to people, if I can get vegetables and meat that I know is not going to be harmful when I eat it, for my health, I'm going to take it. And the older I get, the more healthier I want to be, and the more concerned I am about those things. And I think things will work out for the small farmer. I think we just have to, be creative.
Yeah. No, I think conversations exactly like this are what's going to help make sure that we've got the awareness we need to do it, and I think you're absolutely right. It's about, we talk about in the book, you can't and you shouldn't guarantee the survival of every farm. The problem isn't some farms going away. The problem is that we haven't had a rebirth of the American farmer in generations. It's been a very long time since we've had really kind of a new frontier or a new generation of crops and products that farmers can grow. Now we're at a point where maybe we can change that. But when my great grandpa came over from Europe and decided he wanted to come to America to dig a better living out of there, it was a very entrepreneurial time. He grew and raised a lot of different things and he found what was going to work and he went with that. But we haven't had that kind of rebirth happening for decades in this country, but we're at a point where we can turn that around. I think you're absolutely right.
Do you think also the lifestyle would be attractive to some people coming up in the future? Because, either, right now you go off to a job, you're stuck in a cubicle, you got to listen to Karen talk forever in the meeting that you hate being in. Is there an attraction to coming out and farming and being in the air and getting your hands dirty? Do you feel like that's making a turn as well, just a little bit?
I think so, particularly after COVID. There are a lot of things that happened with COVID that we could discuss, but one of the things that happened is that people realized they can kind of do their work from anywhere to a degree. And you saw a lot of rural areas actually for the first time in a very long time gaining population. Now, it wasn't enough to totally reverse the trend of shifting from rural to urban. It wasn't enough to totally reverse and overwhelm the forces of rural decline that have been going on for a very long time. But it was enough to show that there are people saying, I want something different. I want to live close to the land. I want to live out independently, and that is something that happens. So people care more about where the food comes from than ever before. And more people are thinking about, do I need to return to a rural area, at least have a foot in both the urban and the rural economy for once, because we've had two economies in America for a very long time. And so, COVID, although there were a lot of terrible aspects of it, there were some realizations people had coming out of it, and those are two of them.
Yeah. Well, the book's called Land Rich, Cash Poor, My Family's Hope, and the Untold History of the Disappearing American Farmer. I encourage people to get the book because it's a lot about your family, your personal, their struggles as well. And I appreciate having you on the show. Where can we grab the book?
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much. Book can be found nationwide in independent bookstores, also on Amazon, anywhere else you buy them online. You can find Land Rich, Cash Poor. I appreciate anyone who picks it up and who advances these conversations, because this is exactly how we're going to address what's going on in rural areas and how it affects the dinner table of every single person out there.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on the show, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, you loved that conversation, didn't you?
Absolutely.
Just a little farm boy came out. I had to stop you from getting your suspenders on and your boots, and going outside and rolling around in the mud. I do feel for the farmers, though. I feel like they get forgotten. They're one of the hardest working people on the planet. They're, it's difficult for them. It really is difficult.
Right. But you have to, there's more than, the phrase, and maybe this is not a good phrase to say on television, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, and that's not a good one.
Well, I don't.
That's an old one.
Well, the farmers will know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the farmers will know that. But, in other words, we've got to ask God to give us creativity, because God wants us to eat good vegetables. He wants us to eat good meat. He wants us to eat these things that are not harmful to our body, but are healthy to our body and help our immune system.
Hey, Alan, we're giving away a free booklet called The Living Stone, A Journey of Transformation by Alan Huntsberger himself. It's yours absolutely free. You can get your free copy at gotalktruth.com. Click on resources, request it there. Or you can call our 800 number in the U.S., 1-800-445-3450. Or in Canada, 1-800-915-0056. You can request the booklet there. Great information in there, and it's going to help build your spiritual house, right, Alan?
Totally. That's what it's all about, becoming like Jesus.
You want to know more about us, you can go to our website, gotalktruth.com. Rumble.com/talktruth is where you go to see all our programs. Share those with your friends and family. If you'd like to support our show, we are viewer supported. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on donate, or you can call our 800 number in the U.S. It's 1-800-445-3450. In Canada, it's 1-800-915-0056. You can also, on that line, ask for prayer, receive the free booklet. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys later.
Love you.